Hey, deserving listeners, 90 Day Fiancé, The Single Life. Let's watch.
Next thing you know, we're having dinner. We talked all night long. We finally fell asleep, and I woke up in the morning and said, "Are you my forever?" And she said, "Yes, I am."
Is that Liz? That can't be Liz. Is that Liz? That cannot be Liz. I mean, it looks, is he dating someone that looks just like Liz? No, it's not Liz.
And that person is my girlfriend, Liz.
It's Liz. All right. So, last we heard was at the tell-all from Single Life 2 or 1? Where are we right now? And they had broken up. And it seemed like absolutely broken up. They had broken up 8 times. And then during the tell-all, or before the tell-all, there was that infamous phone call, which I reacted to, by the way. It's on this channel, where he was being verbally abusive and berating her because she drove someone home. It was at work, and a guy needed a ride home, and she actually called him or texted Ed and said, "Is it okay for me to drive him home?" And Ed said, "Okay." This is all gleaned from their conversation on the phone. And then, and this is all alleged, it could have all been doctored, I don't know, but it seemed like this was the case. And then she drove him home, and then after that, Ed was like, "That's disgraceful," or "You're ridiculous," just berating her about how stupid she is for have done that. And clearly he was jealous and triggered, and when he gets that way, apparently he has a tendency to become verbally abusive. Anyway, they had broken up at the tell-all, but then there was talk after the tell-all between the two of them that seemed to imply that maybe Ed seemed like he might want to get back together with her, and then there was seemingly the door was still open for Liz. And a lot of people in the audience are like, "No, Liz, what are you doing?" And then according to Ed, at the beginning of the season, they got back together again, maybe broke up a few more times, and then Ed actually broke up with her and said, "We're done." And it was over again. So then he dated Coyote, that didn't work, and then Teddy died, and Liz reached out to him. They met up, and they are now back together. So, interesting. And I think we're coming up at the end of the season. I'm getting the impression this might be the last episode. I never know. It's kind of interesting how you just never know with 90 Day Fiancé. Is this the end of it? What's happening next? Like with other shows, that, okay, this is when this show is going to happen, and it's going to be this many episodes. Anyway, so maybe we'll find out what happens to Ed and Liz.
I missed you.
Now, I don't know their relationship, but I do know that for some people, they have sufficient or the kinds of relational traumas that result in them, 1, having abuse normalized, and 2, believing that they don't really deserve to have a good life, and 3, maybe even some masochistic notions or impulses to harm the self. When someone harms you and the world teaches you and people teach you that you are punishable and should be punished and there's something wrong with you, sometimes you'll internalize that and you'll actually punish yourself. It's weird. It doesn't make any logical sense, but humans do a lot of things that don't make logical sense, particularly lately, right? And so you, as an adult, might engage in relationships that emulate that past vibe in which you were treated like crap. Also, it becomes normalized to you. Being treated poorly, you might not only seek as a way of confirming the way you feel about yourself, but it might also just feel normal. It's just like, well, this is what love is. It's not out of the norm. Sometimes people rage and will become verbally abusive and berate people. It just happens in relationships. That's what I grew up with. It's normal. It's that means someone loves you. That means someone's invested in the relationship. It happens sometimes. So I don't know if that's what we're seeing. I don't want anyone to think like I know what I'm seeing right now. I have no idea. But it does raise some questions.
And I'm starving.
And I'm starving too. Let's go.
I'll also say that even if that were true, it doesn't doom them. I've worked with many, many individuals and couples who have histories like that are currently in relationships with a lot of volatility, perhaps abuse as well. And we work on things and we recover and we learn how to behave differently. We learn how to own our own feelings. And so it doesn't doom them or anyone to engage in a relationship that is based partially on that recreation. But it does mean that therapy is probably necessary to get one's needs met.
So how long have you guys been back together?
Oh gosh. Today is Saturday. Like 8 days. I was never really an animal person. I opened my heart to Teddy. When Teddy passed, I started talking to Ed again. This time, I have faith that him and I will make it.
Why? I mean, I don't think anyone would take that bet, Liz. So, okay. So what would I feel good about hearing from Liz? If I heard from her, it's like, look, we broke up many times, and he's been pretty awful to me in the past. So I'm realistic. I see the past for what it is. There's a good chance it's going to happen in the future. But I don't know. I just want to see if maybe we can change some things about I want him to go slower. I'm going to try to assert myself. You know, if I heard something like that, I would be more encouraged. But for her to say, like, I think this time's going to be, I think we're going to be totally fine. It's not likely given what we've heard from him. He said he broke up with her, or they broke up like 8 times in a pretty short amount of time. That means a lot of volatility. It means a lot of issues. And so, you know, that's likely to continue. But what do I know? I mean, she obviously knows the relationship a billion times better than I would. So I can only speak from a speculative place from very far away. But it does make us wonder if Liz has issues that make her blind to what she deserves or what's really happening.
My heart's always been with him. I have faith that he's changed the way that he says things, the way that he wants to include me in things. It feels like everything it should have been in the first place.
Okay, so according to her, there's been some changes. I would imagine, though, that his triggers aren't going to change. If she said something along those lines that, well, what happened in the past was he would get triggered and then he would do this and he would do that. And he's in therapy now and he's working on it. If I heard something like that, I'd be more encouraged.
I'm so glad you're in my life. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart.
I feel it.
I can't imagine for one more minute my life without you. In those 6 months,
Very, very, very rough 6 months.
Okay, so we're learning that they were apart for 6 months. That probably includes the tell-all. And it was hard for him, and she's also saying it was very hard for her. So it means that they have, according to what they're saying, very genuine feelings for each other, which can help facilitate one's motivation to work on yourself and the relationship. So hopefully that'll happen.
I was very, very angry and hurt by you. There was never a day where I didn't miss you.
I didn't like who I was. But if I wouldn't have gone to therapy, I would have never known what an asshole I was. I was an asshole to you.
Okay, I mean, that's along those lines. He's saying I was an a-hole, and if I hadn't gone to therapy, I wouldn't have realized that. Okay, but, you know, we've heard similar things from him in the past, but we just have to hope that this self-awareness actually is an indication of helpful and usable self-awareness. And maybe it has, but I don't know if we can know that for sure, given that he has apologized. We've seen him have this repetitive apology mode that he goes into, but then he doesn't change. Particularly, we saw that with Rose. Hey, deserving listeners, as y'all know, I am constantly recommending that people go to therapy. We all need therapy from time to time. Well, one of the options available that is definitely worth checking out is BetterHelp. If you're looking for a therapist, I would give it a try by going to betterhelp.com/Kirk. Make sure you use the promo code Kirk because you get 10% off your first month, and it really helps us out. As you watch these videos, I know many of you have been motivated to find your own therapist, which is great because you deserve it. And I know also that it can be hard to find a good fit, find the right one for you. Well, one of the options available in terms of your shopping is to go to betterhelp.com/Kirk. I've been told you can start communicating with your therapist in under 24 hours. You can message your counselor at any time. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions. I've also been told that it's often less expensive than in-person therapy, and you should know that this service is available to clients worldwide. So go to betterhelp.com/Kirk to get 10% off your first month today.
Whatever it's worth. To throw something away that you love so much.
Another phenomenon that is well known, and I'm sure y'all know about it as well, when you're treated like crap and like you're unlovable, you have this notion in your soul that you will never find love and no one will ever love you. And then when someone comes along and shows some attunement and some love, along with being abusive, you're like, well, this is the best that I'm ever going to get because no one's ever going to love me and I'm never going to have a relationship that is healthy like other people have because I don't deserve that. They might not consciously say that to themselves, but unconsciously, subconsciously, it's ingrained in their assumption and their personality. And they will sometimes settle for relationships that aren't good for them because they're like, well, it's the only way I can get my needs met. Which brings me to another point that some people might yell at people in Liz's position and say, like, what's wrong with you? And the thing that I often wonder, and sometimes know because I'm working with the clients, is that these individuals just have so many unmet needs throughout their life in terms of attachment and attunement and stability and security that they'll take anything. They'll take anything that comes their way. Another phenomenon that it sometimes occurs in situations like this is a version of codependency where you believe it's your job to take care of someone. And sometimes that means taking care of someone who's abusive to you. You know, they have a problem and it's my job to account for that. It's my job to enable it. It's my job to help them to work on it. It's my job to accommodate it. I talk about this in my codependency personality disorder deep dive, and I sometimes call it the chameleon type, the accommodating type, and it's a well-known personality structure based on schemas where you were taught that was your only worth growing up, that your only worth as a child or as a young person was your utility to be useful to someone else's problem. Often it's drug abuse, substance abuse, but it can be other things. It could be a personality disorder in your parent, that kind of thing. So that's another thing. Again, I have no idea what's going on between the two of them. I have hopes, and maybe things will work out.
That's what I did.
You literally,
I know.
you threw me away.
I know, I did. And I own that.
So again, he does this, and maybe he really does own it, and maybe Liz is convinced of that, and maybe they have other conversations where he really explains it, but he has always said this, I'm an a-hole, I own it. And I would be more encouraged if he said, I own it. And, at the time this was happening and I got triggered and I got convinced of this thing, and it was just, if I heard some internal processing, some awareness, some like, how did I get there? But all we ever get from him and a lot of people on this show, and we don't know what's happening behind it, but sometimes there isn't anything behind it because they haven't really thought about it, is that they've thought about it. So I wonder if he's really process it. Like, okay, well, this happened, and then my pattern is to do this, and my pattern is to interpret it this way, and I was really hurt at the time. But so this apology looks exactly the way it looked like with Rose.
And Liz, that is why this ring means so much to me. You are mine forever.
So, moving fast again, according to many people's gauge, I would say they look like they're engaged. I don't know if I included this bit, but they've been dating for 8 days after getting back together, after 6 months apart, after having a huge blow-up relationship with breakups galore. So they're engaged now. Some people would say they're moving fast, but I don't know. I want to believe, but maybe we won't even find out. But I wouldn't be surprised if at the tell-all after this, or maybe even next week, they've broken up again.
I am engaged.
We're engaged. I'm so in love. We talked all night long about what an idiot I was.
Yeah.
And how dumb I was. The next day, I went and bought a ring, and I said, screw it. I reach into my...
It's the same thing. Who knows, but it looks like the same thing. It just looks identical to the past. And why would it change? Even if he's been in the most intensive, wonderful, focused therapy, he's only been in therapy for like 6 months, a year at the most. That's not enough time. So, of course, it's the same. You know, we talked all about, now who knows? I can't know anything, but we stayed up all night talking about what an idiot I was. The tone is the same as it was with Rose. And at the time with Rose, it was like, okay. And then we started to see this pattern of he would be hurtful. And I think coming from a place of, so again, I'll restate my hypothesis about him. I have no idea if it's true that he stated as such, but I think it's deep in his structure that he believes he's not lovable. No one's ever going to love him. And so when there's any kind of indication of abandonment, he feels deeply, deeply hurt. And his MO of response is to attack and to insult. And so I think, the phone call involved that schema being poked at. And in every relationship, there's always indications that that the person doesn't really love you, particularly in the beginning. Or not indications, but if you really choose to read into it, there are a lot of indications. So I think that when that happens, he goes into that mode where he's attacking. Then he's like, oh crap, no one's ever going to love me. And I think he goes into this other mode where he just erases his personality and says whatever he needs to say. I'm an idiot. Oh my God, I'm so stupid. I was an a-hole, and let's move. I'll give you whatever you want. We'll get married. You'll move in. Everything will be fine. And, with Rose, it's like, I'll give you a green card. You'll come to the States. I'll take care of your kids. Everything's good. He just starts but he's not with Cody. He was kind of in that mode. I think that's why Cody didn't like him, because it was, who knows why she didn't like him, but it appeared like she's like, just be yourself. Just be authentic, please. And so he just either is a desperate mode, right? A desperate mode of, please love me. I'll do anything you want. I'm just erasing my personality. And then once the relationship is kind of secure, then he can kind of relax and, stop love bombing. And then he gets triggered in that moment because he re-engages with his personality. And he's more noticing of there's more at stake now because he actually has a relationship. He gets triggered, and then he attacks, and then he apologizes and it just goes back and forth. I feel pretty good about that hypothesis. Of course, I have no idea if it's true. I'd have to ask Ed. I never will. I'll never get that opportunity, I'm quite sure. He could tell me a whole other story, and I could be convinced. He'd be like, no. In therapy, I've learned this. So, who knows? But that's the way it looks from what the data they've shown on the show.
The future for Ed and Liz is we want a relationship built on respect and love. And she wants to make me happy, and I want to make her happy. And we're excited to begin our life together. Here's me never blowing it. It was always Liz. And I'm not going to let her go, and she's not going to let me go.
All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself and take care of others because we all deserve it. We really, really do.